All right, welcome. Nice of you to show up. Thank you for being there and joining me here in the shop here in Canterbury, New Hampshire. We're going to have a nice little technique evening here where we built a shooting board. By the way, if you like this content we have here, consider subscribing. It's no obligation really. You just get notified whenever we put an email out. So we would love that. It helps support the channel and creating great content. All right, now for the evening's menu, we are going to build a shooting board, something like this. It's pretty big, right? Pretty good size. Now, shooting boards can come in all sizes, but what they allow you to do is most of the time they're made to plain end grain. They can be made to plain edge grain, but most of the time they're made to clean end grain like that, and to clean it so beautifully and accurately and true. So you can get a perfect 90-degree cut, or you can set it up to cut miters dead on accurate, polished right off. Because you know, if you try cutting on a crosscut saw or a chop saw, or even a sliding sled, like a crosscut sled on your table saw, it doesn't come off perfectly all the time. Sometimes your blades have a little run out in them, they're not sharp, or it's just giving you a ragged cut for some reason on whatever you're doing. Or it's not dead square, or you can't trust the miter gauge, or whatever it is. Well, in that case, you sometimes want to get that accuracy, and you need a good way to do it and be controlled about it. So a shooting board is awesome for this. And just to demonstrate right off the top what it is before we start making it so that you don't wait forever, here's a piece of cherry. I just hit this on the chop saw. I'm going to put that side against my fence, and here's my shooting board in there nicely. I'm going to lock that in. See, it has a nice rail that catches in my vise. And then the board goes on this little riser block here and goes against the fence. Now, ideally, this fence right here is dead square. Now, I like to build mine to be right and left-handed, and you'll see why a little later. But you can make them just single right-handed if you would like. Now I'm going to square this up. I'm going to bring this out. This is a miter plane. It's one of the uglier planes you can purchase. It's got a low angle blade, a really heavy one. This one was from Lee Nielsen. But they're awesome being compatible with a a shooting board. They're dead square. Because it's got that low angle heavy blade, it's made for trimming end grain. It makes a beautiful cut. This one has a sliding throat, like you can loosen that screw and you can move that front plate forward and back to adjust the mouth to be just small enough for your shaving. I've got it set just right for how much I've got that blade out, and usually I take time to make sure everything is perfect before you show up, but I didn't do that today. I didn't have time. So I think it's pretty good. I think it's where I left it was pretty nice, and it looks pretty nice. So let's see. So I'm going to hold my piece on here, let the board extend slightly over this edge, just slightly, and just start hitting it. See that? Look at what's happening. We're getting shavings, right? But those aren't your classic shavings. These, which if I pull it apart, see how it comes right apart? You couldn't do that with a regular shaving because that's all end grain. And it's light and feathery. And now I'm going to move it out just a touch more, make sure I've got the whole thing, and here we go. It's a great sound, isn't it? All right, so I think I got it all. Oh yeah, it's getting there. Not quite, but I would just till you get the whole way and you can feel it even. I am telling you, that is as dead on as dead on gets. It's just, there's so tight, there's no light coming through, and it's dead square this way. So that's a beautiful squared trued end. If you should need like a butt joint. I almost never need a butt joint. Like, when I think about it, don't often need it. But occasionally you want that precision. And when you work in smaller parts, cutting for moldings, it's really awesome. So it's well worth building one. Now mine, I did mention off the top, it's a little larger, but that's good to me because I have had small projects and it works fine for a small project. But if you had a small shooting board and you had larger pieces, you're going to be, having a little trouble because you won't have it big enough. So you can always do smaller things with a big one, but you can't do larger things with a small one. So that's why I like to build it at this size. Should have mentioned, you're not limited to miter planes. You don't have to go out and buy a Lee Nielsen. Another great choice is a number 7 has a lot of mass to it, and these, I checked it, was nice and square as well, and it's one of the other blades that I keep in my stock that I keep dead flat. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago, we talked about planing flat surfaces, and I talked about putting a camber on the blade to give you a really beautiful performance on flat surfaces. A camber is just a slight curve, so the shavings go out to nothing on each edge. But when you're using a joiner plane, or a miter plane, or a straight block plane, like this guy, this little Lee Nielsen, you always want to keep these blades dead straight across because the vast majority of times that's what you're using it for, to create a flat surface. So these are camberless, all right? Just keep them without camber. All right, so the joiner plane is also an excellent choice because it's got no camber and it's got a lot of mass and it's nice and square. Let me see if I got this set up. Oh yeah, that was good. Look at that shaving, that was a little heavier. Okay, so let's get started. Just to tell you how we're going here. Some shooting boards you'll see, you clamp them in your vise and it's just the board and your plane actually rides, like let's say it was here, on your bench top. So you've got just the board. So you don't have a plate or a base plate like I do. I have this base plate of MDF, 3/4 inch thick, that your shooting plane will ride on, okay? And then I have this little riser block that your material sits on. And what that does is it brings the material up so that it's hitting your cutting surface here. So what happens if you check this out, notice how the blade comes across, and on this plane, it's short about almost 1/4 inch from that edge. All planes, well, not all planes, but most bench planes, and this miter plane, don't go all the way to the edge. So that little space there never gets planed, okay? So what happens is, technically, once I start planing against this edge here, that blade is sticking out far enough where it's taking off a little bit of my side here until it reaches full max. Then the sole of the plane is bearing against that 1/4 inch lower than that. So you never can plane any more than that, all right? So you may wonder, why is it you're planing there? You're not taking that off. Well, the reason is because the blade extends, you don't have the blade all the way to the edge. And that bottom area acts as your stop. And that's what gives you the guide. So when you first start, you're going to just be skimming off a little bit here and a little of your stop. And then you'll have it dialed in and be good to go. That is my riser plate. And then you have your fence, which you want to be dead square to your riser plate, okay? And you want this plate to be dead square, especially here. Or at least this has to be square to your plate, so you end up with a 90-degree edge. And then you have it in your vise with a cleat that's attached to that near edge. Now a little bit for dimensions, if you want to build it as big, you can build it however big you want. So I'm going to start out with my base plate, and this is 14 by 24, okay? I made it a little deeper than that other one, but I like it like that, okay? And then I'm going to use a cleat that's just 3/4 by 3/4. That saw cut is not, it's not important. Just a piece of scrap, and I had a cut in it. So I'm going to use that for my cleat. And then you'll need your riser plate here, and that is 14 again, so it sits right on top, and by 18. So you end up with like a 3-inch margin on either side for your plane to slide on, and works really well. And then I've got my back rail, which I'm using, I like a stout piece because I want to glue this down and have it not move for a good long time. I actually selected, I had a chunk of white oak hanging out, and I just took a cut off so that I've got quarter sawn white oak. So this is going to stay nice and true, and it's squared up nicely, and it's 1.5 inches wide by 1 5/8 high. This is nice and true, but I want to make sure I set up the face of this fence, like I just said, nice and square to this edge. So I'm 90 here, and I'm 90 here. And so to do that, I'm actually going to, rather than try to feel my finger flush here, I'm going to make a little saw curve. And with that saw curve, I'm going to stick this spline in there, and that's going to act as a fence for me to hold it against while we get some glue and some nails on there. All right? So to do this, we need to go over to the table saw, and over there, I'll show you briefly how I squared this up. I did square it up. It's squared up pretty nice. Oh, by the way, you can use MDF, or you could use plywood, like Baltic birch for the base. And for this plate, I'm using some plywood. It's only like 3 ply. It's not the greatest, but I'd like a 1/2 inch piece here, 1/2 inch ply or 1/2 inch MDF, 1/2 inch Baltic birch, whatever you want to use. But make sure if you're using a cheaper ply like I have here, oh, there's a little void. I'm going to make this my primary edge, okay? If you're using a ply like I have here, the layers alternate. So we have a center layer that's going that way, and I can see the edge grain of the long layer on top and bottom going this way. Well, I don't want that soft grain. I want to make sure that I have mostly hard grain on the edge for me to ride on. So I oriented going out the 14-inch side. So this is where my plane is going to be bearing on. I've got the most end grain there. I've got 2 layers of end grain, and only that center is not. So that's going to be a little more durable over time, and that's what we want right here. All right, so, but if you're using Baltic birch, it doesn't matter. The layers are so tight, put it however you want. So this is the area where I'm going to put my fence. We're going to put the rail right there, like that. Now, I cut this rail the same length as my support board, which is 18, okay? And you want that pretty flush because you're going to make your cut, and that supports your cut so it doesn't blow out. Now, so I'm going to make this rail measures 1.5 inches. So I'm going to make that groove cut right here, like 1.5 inches out, and I'm only going to go about 1/8 inch deep or so, and then use that stick to line that up. So let's go on over to the table saw, and we'll make that cut. Now this is one of those cases where you really want to know you've got square and not fuss with it. So I use this and set it up, and I made, let me just show you the cuts I made. I ripped this edge and this edge to 14. And you know that when you're using a rip fence, if you're already pretty true here, that the fence, assuming your fence is true, like mine is, it's almost as if you're joining it straight when you're making a cut. So sometimes when I want to use my table saw, almost like a joiner to get 2 beautifully parallel, true edges, I'll just take like the factory edge, which might be a little bumpy or whatever. I'll make a skim cut or cut it and then leave a little over, and then I'll turn it around and take that fresh cut surface against my fence. That second cut, now I'm a little narrower, creates 2 very clean, dead parallel cuts because you're using your fence almost like a joiner. So once you have those, now you want to get it cross-cut to your 18. So we're going to start out. This is just a sample piece. This one's a little undersized, but I'm going to just show you what I did for the other one. Let's turn on the dust. I'm going to make a nice cross-cut. I'll know that I'm dead 90 here. And then I can get rid of this and use the fence to cut my other side dead parallel to this edge. And if that's square, and I make this other edge parallel to it, we'll be good. You could turn it and just cut it like this as well, but the only thing I don't like about that is it's harder to get it to carry all the way through. I like getting the parallel side, but I'll go ahead and square one, and then we'll do another. Run that all the way through. So I ran that all the way through so I wouldn't have a stopping point. Sometimes your saw will leave a little impression there if you don't cut all the way through on a piece of plywood like this. So that's why I went all the way through and took it out. And that's why I'm going to use the fence now to cut my other side parallel. So I would set this right to my 18, or you could put a stop on your sled and go for it. Well, actually, I'm a little less than 18. And when doing this, you should have a splitter on your saw. I'm going to put in my little micro jig splitter. All right, here we go. Okay, now we're going to make our groove cut. This one I did the exact same way. It's nice and square and true to our dimension. So we're going to make that groove cut 1.5 inches off this edge. And we know that groove will be dead square with this edge and these sides. So, with the sides. So we need that out. And I just want a short little groove here. I don't want to cut too deeply. That's enough. A little over 1/8. Here we go. This is something I actually haven't done. So, I just dawned on me this would be a good way to set a front edge rather than just feeling for the back and cutting a full dado. I don't want that. This groove is also going to serve a secondary purpose of catching dust and making it a little cleaner. Now I'm going to set this in the groove, and let's see if this works. Oh yeah. So that sets right up snug to it. And if I keep nice even pressure, and I want to get it flush on each end because it's the same length as my piece here. All right. So I'm going to get a little glue in there and hold that pressure nice. Then get a couple clamps and I'll nail it from underneath. So here we go. Get some glue. There we go. We're not going to give this a heck of a lot of time to dry, but I think we'll give it enough. It'll be all right. Okay. Set that on there. All right, so that feels good. I'm solidly against the stop. I'm letting that glue just kind of grab, making sure I'm flush on the ends. Feels great. And I'm feeling it must be pretty true and square. because I'm equally pressured against the stop. So if that glue just tacks slightly, it won't move when I put the clamps on. I don't want it to slide around, so I'm just giving it a second here. All right, I'm just going to set this guy right here. All right, now I'm going to hit this with some nails, no veggies. And I've got some brads in here, some 18 gauge 1.25 inch. I'm just going to fire away. I'll put a couple near the end. That's good. Well, I guess I'll just leave them on there in the meantime. And we'll slide out our piece in case that's an issue. And we should be, I'm going to check that for square, making sure that came out right. Oh yeah, dead nuts right there. Nice and square on the other end. Beautiful, okay? So that's going to set up nice. And then what I like is actually that groove will prevent any dust, like as you're going along, from getting trapped in there and keeping your workpiece off the fence. So it serves a dual purpose there. But I'm just making it up as I go along. It's really not in the book. All right, so while we're letting that dry, we can do a couple things. We'll put our cleat on here. Now this was a scrap piece I used from the day. We built our oval jig. Remember that? And I cut into that board. So I'm going to get my cleat on here. I've got to glue that on as well. Pretty simple operation here. Just a nice bead of glue. This is not super critical, but it's awesome that you can just clamp it into your vise and get going on what you're doing. All right, so this one I'll just feel along here. Make sure the nails weren't too long. There we go. Get any glue out of here. I don't want to put too much on. All right, that's good. And we have to wait before we can attach that, but we can work on our miter setup. And let me show you what I have for that. To use the miter, what we're going to do, this will be up here on our shooting board. We're going to have a triangular piece against our fence that we can just run quick little drywall screws to secure it to our fence. And it has to be I like to make it so it's a little longer than the fence. Then we can trim that so that the miter goes right out to each side. And this too will be right and left-handed. So we've got to make a triangular piece that will give us perfect 45-degree angles to cut when we're ready to shoot miters, okay? So to do that, I'm going to show you this method. I'm going to use a piece of Baltic birch, 3/4 inch, to make this miter fence. And this piece is about 15 inches square, but it is absolutely square. I tested my fence using this, verifying again. So I made a square cut here on the fence. And then I took off the crosscut sled and I put this edge against the fence to cut this edge, and then this edge to cut that. So now I had the opposite sides were parallel. So if this is square, all four corners should be square. And if all four corners are square to each other like that, then the diagonals will measure exactly equal. Okay, and I did that. I checked it. It's 21 3/4 shy. 21 and 3/4 shy. It really is. It's like when I say shy, it's a 64th shy both ways. So
I trust you.
it's great. In fact, you could check it with every square I've got here, and this corner is dead on 90. I mean, it's really good. You can break out the woodpeckers 1812, like the battle, and bang. I mean, it is on the entire way across. So you know your square. So now I've got a good 90 there, and that's what you want to start out with. Make sure you've got 90 on a corner, okay? So that's the main thing. You may say, why are you making 90? You're doing a miter thing. Why do you care about that? I'll tell you in a second. Well, we've got that, and we want our long edge to be greater than 18. So I did the math, the old Pythagorean theorem. So if I wanted 18.5, I squared that, then divided it by 2, and took the square root by one of those sides, and I knew how long I had to make these sides to get 18.5. And it turns out right about 13. It'll give me a little less than 18.5, but that'll be enough. So I'm going to just use my rule here, and I'm going to get it right on 13 at this end, okay, coming off of my square corner. I'm going to get that thing right there, right on the money, and then make a nice little pencil mark. And then repeat coming back this way. Again, right on 13, pencil mark here. Okay, so if I connect these points, I'm going to draw this across. I'll get a nice diagonal. And then just draw my line. Beautiful. Here we go. So now these sides are both equal, so these should be 45. That's 45 degrees, and this is 45 degrees. Now, 45 plus 90 equals 180. And if you remember this from geometry class, every triangle, the sum of the three angles equals 180. Okay? So if this is a true 90, these two angles will also add up to 90. They have to. Okay? So if this is dead 90, that's going to be 90, and that's going to be 90. Even if I screwed up, like let's say I didn't get it perfectly the same length, which let's say I made it a little longer like that. I messed up. I made this one ended up being a little shorter like that. Well, this angle, let's say I did it by a degree. This one would have to be 46 degree angle, and this one would have to be 44. So regardless, the sum of these two angles will be dead on 90 if you start with dead 90 here. That's why this is really key to making your miter shooting plane dead 90. So you'll be able to shoot off of both sides, one miter here, and those miters are going to come together to be dead 90. Okay? If by chance you missed, and let's say your square up here was 91 degrees, well, these two are going to add up to 89. They have to. But that 89 degrees, when those two miters come together, it's always going to be an 89 degree miter. So it's going to mess you up. So you really need to make sure that's good before you do this. All right, I'm going to go to the bandsaw that line to the line, and then I'll go to the joiner and just skim join it and get a true flat surface, and I'll meet you back here. You can watch me while I do this. So there we go. Now we're a little over length, so we're going to trim these ends. And for that, I'll use my sled. And I'm going to set it on there.
Tom, is joining plywood bad for the blades at all?
Yeah, some plywoods are worse than others. Baltic birch. I believe it's the glue. Somebody can clarify, but I know it's bad because every time I do that, and that's why I moved my fence way out to the end, so I would use an area of the knives that I don't often go to, because every time you run Baltic birch across, you'll end up seeing the pattern of the layers of the birch kind of dented or, dulling your blades in that pattern. So, yeah, it's not great. I try to do it sparingly when I have to. All right, so I'm going to make a little pencil line under each side here. And, this is tricky because I got that groove in there. I can't make a nice little pencil line with the groove, but I can get it started. Okay, that'll work. Let me use a square to square those up. Over here. And I'm just going to trim this. So I could have left that longer, but what you basically want is you want to strengthen your corner a little bit so your plywood overlaps or extends beyond the end. So let me just trim this off on the saw again, and we'll clean it up with the plane when we get it on there. Okay.
I wasn't sure if I should show you.
No, I know. It's fine. That was good.
Quick little jaunt there.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're good here, given we got the nails in there, and that glue is set up. And now we can attach this to our base, and we've got our cleat on there, so we can use our vise to start holding it in place. There we go. So let's get this knocked in, and we'll test it for our 90. Let's see here. I'm going to measure about 3 inches on each end we have. So right there, I'm going to make a little line. Okay, so here we go. Let's get some glue on here. I'll glue this down, and then I'll shoot some pin nails in it. What would a night be if we didn't use the pin nailer? But the pin nailer and the nail gun, the most I use those is when I'm building jigs. So they're great to have for that. I'm going to get some good glue up here so that it doesn't move. All right, that'll do it. Let's get it on there. Just going to go for like flush along the back. It isn't super critical that this is square on here, because the main thing is this being square. We already dialed that in, so we're good there. Let's rub that in there. Nice. Okay, I'm going to get this positioned here. Just trying to hold good force down. Make sure it's flat, because this plywood was bubbling up a little bit, but now it's getting down there. Don't put any in your hand. It's a good idea. But, they don't make a big hole, so it's all right if you did. Actually, I didn't say that. It's like nailing flooring. Okay, that should be pretty true. Now, one little added thing is good to do is wax up your channels on both sides. So where your plane's going to run, like right here, you want to get that nice and slick. So put a liberal amount of paste wax in there, It's a thing of beauty. I'm going to put some on my, if I get it on my shooting edge there, down low, the plane will be riding against that kind of burnished, waxed plywood. And we're going to be probably trimming that off a little, so no need there. Just goop some on the other side. You like this?
There's a conversation happening.
Oh, yeah? About what?
One of our wonderful women who watch posed a question to me on how I would recommend, I don't know how to say this, how I have handled the purchase of tools over the years. And I've been thinking.
Well, it's different.
It's different because it's your living, so it's a different conversation. And
It's a little different.
Certainly not simple.
As you hear me, you know I don't have all the best. When it's your living,
As I have the Felder in the background.
Well, I only have that because of later opportunities, but I didn't buy that.
I just posted a picture on Instagram of Tom's early first shop, a small little outbuilding behind our first home in eastern rural North Carolina with very little room for the old decrepit tools that he had handed down to him.
It was a 20 by 20 space, but then I had a 10 by 20 where I did some finishing. But I actually started in the basement of Buckman Tavern.
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell anyone that. A historic site. If you've ever been to Lexington, Mass, we were the caretakers for between 86 and 90 of the Buckman Tavern, where the Minutemen rendezvoused before the Battle of Lexington, Patriots Day, which just celebrated. And the battle, the first shot of the Revolution was fired by some drunk guy who spent the night there.
No one knows. No one knows.
No one talks about that, but quite a number of guys stayed the night there, and then the British showed up at 6 a.m. All right, here we go.
Okay, keep going. I don't want to bore everybody.
Look, I'm just going to tack this down for a second so I can run the screws in. I'm going to use these. These barely come out, but they'll just hold it in position because I wanted to position this so that it's just sticking out and I'm solidly against the fence. Now I'm going to pre-drill, put this in now. And then I'll show you both methods. First, I guess I'll do the miter first now that I'm getting this set up. But I'll put a screw in here. And I guess I'll put 2 more.
Tom, is there a reason you didn't use melamine? Am I saying that right? 3/4 inch board for the bottom?
Well, this is very similar. You could use melamine. So anything that stays flat that you like, that you have.
That's a little bright, sorry.
I just used the MDF. I had MDF, and it's, whatever you have would work for that. Okay, so this is how I modify it. So this will come off, and because you've got the 3 holes there, it'll find those just right when you need to. All right, so let's go ahead. Now we've got it set up. We allowed that fence more time to set in. And we'll start with the miter because our miter fence is on there. All right, now I do have a little miter crosscut sled that I use on the table saw, and it's pretty good, but again, off the table saw, it's not perfect. I have made frames right off it, and it's fine. But if you really zoom in, it's a little gappy because of the texture of the end grain. These I just ran across my my chop saw over there, and I know they're not absolutely 45, but No, they're not quite. But here we go. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make this frame. Let's see how it looks best. These are a little different color wood, but that's fine. So this is off the chop saw. You can see not a bad miter, but it's a little gappy. And let's see if it's even square. Okay, not square. See how it's open there? Look up at the long end, the other end. So I got about a 16th inch gap there. So this is not, that was not true. But let's go ahead. And now we're going to set this over. But before using this, I have to trim and get my fence all dialed in. Okay, so I'm just barely ticking that. I'm probably dulling my blade slightly, but that's okay. So now I'm nice and flush. So now I can bring this out. I'm holding it slightly proud. Okay, and here we go. Beautiful, huh? Let me see if I got all the way. All right, that felt good. Yeah, I got a little dinger in there. Now I'm going to put the other one over here. This is good too, because if your blade is set slightly askew in there, like you're taking a little heavier on one side or the other, by doing it this way, you're canceling out any error on your plane like that. And this is where you got to be. Oh, it feels a little sharper here. Look at those nice shavings, huh? So just a couple wisps up there. So hopefully, look at the miter. Look how nice that is. Trust me, it's really nice. If I pull that up, you would have no view at all of a seam.
Great.
Let me hold this here. Let's see if it's square. I'm a little proud. Let me see why that happened. Make sure I did both of these correctly. Okay, that feels good. Oh, you know what? I didn't break this side in. That might have been the problem. All right, here we go. Okay, that feels better. All right, let's see if that looks better. That looks pretty good. I'm not totally perfect, but it's pretty darn close. It's better than it was. And I know I'm square here. Let me try it one more time. What do you think? I have to get a little more. I'm a little long on the point, and so maybe I'm not. My technique might be a little off. You got to make sure that you're getting it fully flush. Like if you have it pushed out over the edge too much, you won't be getting a true miter. So you want it just over slightly and go until nothing's happening. So you've truly planed that surface parallel with that edge. Let me try this edge again. See if I left a little on the point.
Mike's suggesting longer strokes, maybe?
No, I'm going the full way, Mike. It's as long as you can go. Oh, you mean further back?
If you get a chipper, the smallest piece of dust between the 45 and the workpiece, it will change the angle. I do a lot of
Okay.
he says.
Well, that's nice, thanks. That's probably true. All right, let's see if this works better.
Have you ever used a Chinese pole plane?
No.
Ron's asking.
Oh, yeah, I have. I've tried them, yeah.
Is it just a matter of
There we
reversing
go.
the shooting board then?
That looks nice.
Sorry, you're into this.
Look, I'm square as it can be. I'm happy with that. All right, so let me pop this off and let's check it for the 90. The beauty of this is that the way that cancels out on either side. Now, sometimes you might need an angle that's a little off of a 45, and for that, I'll just put like a piece of tape. Sometimes I'll put a piece of veneer. Like you can put a piece of veneer in here. I'm just using a shaving. And it will hold your piece out a little bit like that. So you can find it. Move the veneer more forward if you want to increase the angle like that. You'll be taking more off the heel. So when you get grooving on this thing, you can really do some amazing work. Now let's just try a square end. This one was right off the table saw as well, or the chop saw, squared up a piece of cherry. And now we've got our 90. Let's try old Granddad's. I don't use it much, but it's great for this because it has a lot of mass, and you can kind of throw it. You can feel it just throwing across there. So you bring it out a little and go until you don't hear anything. Okay, if you haven't moved, you're going to have a good 90. So there I am. Bang. It's right on the money. Let me see from the other edge. Yeah, it's nice. So we flip it over. You could do it off the left hand too if you wanted. But if it's 90, it's 90. So, but again, you can use this. There are times when you'll want to come over the left side. I just want to check this end, see if it's dead on. I've got that blade out a little far for a shooting board, but okay, let's see if that worked. I should dial that back a little. It's a little too heavy. Man, that is so good. I'm trying to see if I'm holding it wrong, but there's no light coming through there at all. So it's giving me a dead on 90, and that's good. All right, so check it out. That's pretty sweet, huh? I just keep mine set over there usually, leaning against in here. And now I've got a refurbished one, and my miter, which I keep with it. I just keep the screws handy, and you can shoot them right in there if you need. And there you go, a classic double-ended shooting board.
Okay, Yossi's asking how you keep all four pieces the same length if you are taking different shavings for each end.
Oh, great question. Usually it's so little that I wanted to almost make a picture frame tonight, but I knew we weren't going to have time. You would cross-cut all of your pieces. I usually do it with a stop, so you're getting all your miter pieces the same length. And then you come over here, and you're just going to think you're going to hit them all with the same stroke. So you'd set it up to take a light shaving, and you're going to just hit each one probably 1-2 strokes. I was doing more because I was sort of breaking in this new shooting board, and it's so set up on a piece of scrap, and you don't want the blade out heavy. You're just going to be cleaning off the end, taking away the saw marks and getting square or mitered. You'll know by doing a couple practice ones first, chop them and see. You'll know how many strokes it takes to get there, and you just do it like that, and you'll find that you're taking off so little. Even if you have to go 1 or 2 more on an edge, when you bring the whole thing together, it's going to pull up really nicely. All right, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out tonight. Hope you enjoy that. We didn't make anything, but we are ready to make something really fine with our shooting board. So if you like this content, go ahead and consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything.
Hit that like button.
Yeah, and hit the like button and ring the bell while you're at it. None of this costs you anything. It just lets you know when we have new content, and it helps the channel and to create new and better projects and adventures like this one. So thanks so much for being here. Look forward to seeing you next week right back here on Shop Night Live. Good night, everybody.
That was good. That was a good one.
When somebody gets sick of that, maybe I should do something else.
Works for me. Thanks, everybody. See you later.